afternoon. It is Shirley with Spirit of Matter, and this is a special episode. I'm basically going to look at the chart of um, Moses ben Maimonides, which is known as Rambam, and it's very interesting for me. This episode is actually inspired by a comment that I got, and that is a funny thing. I was doing a little bit of channeling work, and I was going to pitch to an investment company an idea to basically invest a couple of shekels from my own welfare assistance and see what can my money do, so to take responsibility and also have that broadcasted live. So I was at a certain company, and that company had to do with an eagle. And as I was standing there, I was seeing the building where JP Morgan is at, so the name of the company of the building, and the employee there kind of made the connotation that they don't have a lot of customers, but their customers are very, very, very big companies in the private and public sector. And he let me see the CEO spontaneously, and the CEO just said, "Well, I can't, like, we don't make operations, we don't expose our activity." Following which, I didn't ask him, of course, any questions. I was being polite and got out of the building, quite shocked that I was able to be there at first place. Um, but the thing is that that was problem with transparency, because those big companies are your 401k. Those big companies are the companies that you are by force investing in, whichever investment portfolio you hold, as both private sector or employee or independent or business owner, entrepreneur. And I was just writing a post about it on Facebook, and somebody just said, and I mentioned the eagle, and somebody just said, "Well, you remind me of Maimonides," which was one of the greatest compliments that I ever got. And I was like, okay, I really need to take a look at this. And then he told me that Maimonides was called the Great Eagle. So, eagle per se immediately comes as a Jupiterian animal. I know that I'm ruled by Jupiter in Pisces, but it comes as a Jupiterian animal. So, it makes sense that a very religious person who would make renovation in religion, I would expect to see. It can be even Jupiter in Aquarius, because Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, and I'm trying to predict what I'll see. I already saw that he has ascendant Leo, but nothing more. And so I'm trying to do my regular Spirit of Matter and predict. So immediately I think about a person, basically what of his endeavors. So let's take a look at what he did. So he was a Sephardic Jewish philosopher who became one of the most prolific, influential Torah scholars of the Middle Ages. In his time, he was also pre- preeminent astronomer and physician. When they say astronomer, like those of you who do not like or who are not in the Twitter clique, when they say astronomer, they usually mean astrologer as well. Most people who were astronomers, especially in the Middle Ages, before the Middle Ages, anybody who was not a modern astronomer, but modern, like recent times, was probably an astrologer as well, as you would use astronomy to predict astrological insights, whether omens for personal life or for mundane world events, depending on the time, depending on the context, and sometimes for medicine as well with horary astrology. So you needed to know the placement. You didn't have AstroSeek like I have, and you had to have good mathematical skills to be able to do that. So when they say astronomer and it's Middle Ages or Antiquity, know that it's an astrologer. So he was also astrologer, a physician serving in the personal physician of Saladin. He was born in Cordova within the Almoravid Empire, present day Spain. He was born on Passover Eve, and I already got the date, which was the 6th of April. Now I have to say something, okay? This is my ninth astrological year, which is a year of culmination. Okay, the next year will be one, so a new cycle. So that means that of the past 7 years, or basically 10 years, things are coming to kind of culminate to a closure for a circle. And I have been seeing the number six a lot. And I was like, I'm in ninth astrological year. I've seen things to do with nine, but it's so weird that I'm seeing the number six. And I know that it's one. I was born in May 6th. It's one of my personal numbers. I don't remember which. And um, previously, when I learned, I had a teacher that taught me. Basically, came to her for a therapy session, and she taught me channeling. She was a holistic teacher and healer, and which I really appreciate. So she basically taught me how to, according to her prescription, which is not necessarily what I do today, but how to make sure that I'm connecting with the sixth sphere, which is basically God, or the creation. And so she told me that when I was seeing like 666, she said like, no, this is not the thing. You should be seeing 1 6. And I kept seeing 1 6 right now. And this comment about, you know, Maimonides, which I don't even know where it came from, um, because I just said on the shoulder of eagles instead of on the shoulder of giants. Um, I won't lie to you. Yes, in part of my channeling, I did receive things to do with people that were religious Jewish people, famous people. I just took it, with a grain of salt because it's just a human experience, and I never knew these people in person. Um, but when I come into his birthday, that was April 6th, again, this number shows up in my life. So I don't understand the connection. Therefore, I'm kind of being drawn to look at it. Okay. So 6 4. Okay, I'm in fourth house perfection year. This could be a house. This could be grave. Many things. But this is more the vessel. Okay, a little bit about the vessel. And so, being born in Passover, 1138 or 1135. Um, I would predict that, I don't know if that was already Pluto in Aquarius. I remember I looked for something with Pluto, Uranus, Neptune trine. I didn't find anything in the last 1,000 years. Um, I don't know, but that's already pointing to an outer planet cycle. He worked as a rabbi, physician, philosopher in Morocco and in Egypt. He died in Egypt in 12 December 1204. His body was transported to Lower Galilee um, and eventually buried in Tiberias. So I haven't been to the grave, which perhaps I would like to visit maybe this year. Okay, so born. Okay, it's not known if he was born on 30th of March or 6th of April, maybe 20th of March or 4th of April. So we don't have an exact birth time. And so what I'm taking is from AstroSeek. I guess with this thing, I better look at outer planets to inner planets. I might not get the exact picture of either the sun of the moon or the moon. Um, Although all of them would be sun in Aries, okay, that probably means I won't have ascendant and houses. So what I can predict is outer planets and what outer planets are connecting with his inner planets. And so I said it can be Jupiter in Aquarius, or it can also be Jupiter connecting with Uranus. Okay, a little bit about the vessel. Okay, me. I have Uranus in Jupiter sign in Sagittarius, around Antares, it's 12 degrees Sagittarius, and my own Jupiter is in Saturn sign, is in Capricorn, with Saturn in the ninth house. So this kind of old and new tradition, revolutionary slash bringing back the future or bringing the future to the past or something like that, is coinciding with the Rambam because he was so known for what he did, and I guess he was changing things relative to his times. Then I would predict there to be a kind of Uranus Saturn Jupiter. Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, kind of related. Either um, uh, Jupiter in Aquarius or Saturn in Aquarius. So it can be with Saturn in Aquarius, or for other planets, it can be Uranus in either Pisces or Sagittarius, or Uranus related to Jupiter in a certain way. And there I would need to see deeper into what he did to understand the connection between the new and the old. And that would be to me the Uranus Saturn connection. Or Jupiter Saturn. It can also be played with that. So he died, we don't know if he was 66 years old or 69 years old. Oh, okay, so we don't know exactly the years. And that leads even more to outer planets, okay? So if we don't have the years, so within those years, Jupiter can change signs, Saturn can change signs, some outer planets can ingress, and that makes it very difficult to try and see what can I get from the chart. Okay, because if I wanted to do outer planets to inner planets, so I don't have ascendant, I don't have houses, the position of the moon, the position of the sun are not going to be exact. But we know he was born around Passover, so we know he was born in around April. I guess the differences in the, like, we have the month, but we don't have the year, which I found interesting, and we don't have the exact day. So we don't know. There's a 3 years difference. Okay, 3 is the number of Saturn, which is also something that I would need to look at, of why there is 3 years difference. I don't know how to do rectification. So his works, Mishneh Torah, the guide for the perplexed. Okay, it's Moreh Nevuchim and Mishneh Torah. Um, he had one that the oh he had a spouse, the first spouse, daughter of Nathaniel Baruch, and the second daughter of Michael Alevi. Okay, so Levi is considered the ancestry of people who were around the like the pretty much the whole and so like Cohen and Levi usually cannot marry people who are divorced or something like that. So it's funny because the Rambam had for his second marriage the daughter of someone named Halevi. Perhaps Halevi is not Levi, but it's because he was divorced. Oh, he was widowed. So maybe he was widowed, and I don't know the halachot in that era. It was classical philosophy, 12th century philosophy, Middle Eastern philosophy, and Jewish philosophy, Aristotelianism. So he was inspired by Aristo, um, which I would need to kind of refresh myself because I remember ideas, but I don't remember exactly who said what. So Judeo-Arabic, medieval Hebrew, religious law, halacha, um, oath of Maimonides. Okay, yeah, just special oath, golden mean, rule golden mean, 13 principles of faith. He was influenced by the Talmud, by Plato, Aristotle, Al-Farabi, Avicenna, Avimpas, Averroes, and Al-Ghazali. All very fascinating names that I know, except for Plato and Aristotle. and of course some Talmud. I don't know these people, which is exciting because I never looked into. I think it was the Rambam that talked about the doubt as strengthening the faith, and this was something that I found out while reading scriptures. I don't even remember which scriptures, and that I was 12 years old, and that was leading me to experiment with atheism and basically learn science. So I've always saw my atheism. I became atheist on Kippur Day, which was one of the only times that I fasted. So I was trying to fast, and then I was reading scriptures, and I ran into the doubt as strengthening the faith, and that gave me this kind of validation to go delve into atheism and delve into science. Currently, I'm possibilionist, um, but if I'm not mistaken, the Rambam at the 11th century was the person who coined the notion of the doubt as strengthening the faith, which is such a beautiful idea because first of all, integrates science, it's very humanistic, and it's allowing a sense of connection that is authentic. Okay, so a person who has all of his ninth house planets, including Saturn retrograde, it is the life path of a person who needs the doubt or needs to go out of the alignment of religion in order to reintegrate it later in time from a more mature, from a more authentic, not because he was told to be religious or he was taught to be religious, but because he went through a certain path. Um, and so Rambam is a key figure in my faith. Uh, so he influenced all Jewish philosophy and Catholic theology, especially Spinoza, Magnus, Albertus Magnus, Aquinas, Joyce, Bodin, Leibniz, Newton, Strauss, Buber, Rosenzweig, Friedlander, Feckenheim, and Levinas. Again, except for Spinoza and Newton, of course, perhaps some Leibniz, I'm like theology is something that I have like but again it was a part of my path to make these concepts myself rather than look what other people think. um, so yeah, so I'm delving into a whole new, like I've learned so many things in my life. This I have not a clue in. Okay, during his life most Jews greeted his writings on Jewish laws and ethics with acclaim and gratitude, even as far away as Iraq and Yemen. And he was revered head of the Jewish community in Egypt. His writings also had vociferous critics, particularly in Spain. He was posthumously acknowledged, so known after his death, as one of the foremost rabbinic decisors and philosophers in Jewish history, and his copious work comprise the cornerstone of Jewish scholarship. And this is true. You can't go anywhere Jewish without thinking about Rambam. Well, basically, he wrote Mishnah Torah, if I'm not mistaken. It was a book that dealt with everything. There was a segment for science, for law, for like all these things. And he basically looked at all those things, at law, at philosophy, at civil life, at intimate life, at ethics, at medicine, at science, and of course in religion. And he wrote his own Mishneh Torah. He wrote his own basically guidance as to how to read the Torah as per the Rambam. Very inspirational. I do believe that those things are dynamic. So everything has a reasoning, its own reasoning, and those reasonings are true for the times. And we are embarking on a new phase in religion in general, because certain things need to be readapted. Okay, it's happening all the time, but they're happening nowadays. So I would not be surprised if he was born with Pluto in Aquarius. I'm not sure. but it would not surprise me at all. Um, this corpus of knowledge. So, his 14-volume Mishnah, what I spoke about, still carries significant canonical authorities as a codification of halacha. Okay, and there are both good things and troubling things that people still look at Rambam from the 12th century as per how to interpret halacha in 2023. Okay, certain things are very good. Certain things perhaps are no longer relevant and need to be changed, but we don't have another Rambam, which we probably will be having. He's sometimes known as the Great Eagle, okay, Hanesher HaGadol, in recognition of his outstanding status as a bona fide exponent of the oral Torah. A case of stories told, the stories told, basically, not just written. Today in his tomb in Tiberias bears the epitaph "From Moses to Moses, none were like Moses." So his name was Moses, and basically he's being compared to Moses, the great prophet, as the magnanimity of his work was pretty much the closest to Moses. So yeah. Aside from being revered by Jewish historians, Maimonides also figures very prominently in the history of Islamic and Arab sciences, and he's mentioned extensively in studies. Influenced by Aristotle, Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, and his contemporary Ibn Rushd, he became Ibn Rushd. He became prominent philosopher and polymath in both Jewish and Islamic worlds. Again, to me, I'm like a girl walking into a candy store. I'm seeing all these names that I know nothing about. They hold so much information. So yeah. So he referred to himself, Moses, son of Rabbi Maimon the Spaniard, in medieval Hebrew. He was called Ram, short for our Rabbi Moshe, and in modern Hebrew, Rambam for our Rabbi Moshe, son of Maimon. I'm sorry. There is a satire show called The Jews Come in Israel, and they made an episode about the Ramban and the Ramban coming. There's just another famous rabbi, and he was less famous than the Rambam, and going into a bar and trying to order something, and everybody mistaking him for the Rambam. And I just can't like ignore this episode when I think about it. So great satire, and I love religious satire. I think it's a way to honor religion in a way that's more authentic sometimes than even the scriptures. Um, so yeah, in Arabic he's sometimes called son of Amram, son of Maimon, of Obadiah, of Cordoban. And there is Arabic here, Abu Imran Musa bin Maimon bin Ubaidallah al-Qurtubi, or more simply, Moses, the son of Maimon. Okay, so I don't know if his father was Maimon. I didn't understand from that. In Greek, the Hebrew Ben is son of. It's also, son. Becomes the patronymic suffix "idus", forming uh, Moses Maidmonides. Okay, so Idus. So son of is Idus, and that is Moses Maidmonides in Greek. Just, really famous thinker. Let's look at his biography. So early years. Again, he was born in Cordova, 1138 or 1135, and I would need to look if Pluto is maybe in between like Capricorn and Aquarius, and maybe he was born at that time, and it would make sense that I come back to him and at this time. In Andalusia, in the Muslim-ruled Almoravid Empire, during what some scholars consider to be the end of the golden ages of Jewish culture in the Iberian Peninsula. After the first century, the Moorish rule, his father, Maimon ben Joseph, so his father's name was Maimon, was Spanish Dayan, which is a Jewish judge, whose family claimed direct paternal descent from um, Simon ben Judah Hanassi, and thus from the Davidic line. Maimonides, no, don't do that. Okay. No, this gives me. Ooh, it's a lot of. Yeah. Okay. Maimonides later stated there were 38 generations between him and Judah Hanassi. His ancestry going back 4 generations. I'm third generation to a Holocaust survivor, and I don't have like 38 track back. Whether it's good or bad, it's just that is just very interesting to read about people who know all to their lineage. Um, have like I know my grandmother's mother and father were named, I think, Leah um, and Israel probably, which is my uncle. So that's the most I know, and even that is something I recently learned. So yeah, his ancestry going back 4 generations is given his Igeret Teiman, Epistle of Yemen, as Moses son of Maimon, the judge of son of Joseph the Wise, Romanized Ha-Chacham, okay, which is the wise, son of Isaac the rabbi, Harav, which is the rabbi, son of Obadiah the judge is Dayan, and at the end of his commentary on the Mishnah. However, slightly different genealogy is presented. Moses, son of Maimon the judge, son of Joseph the wise, son of Isaac the judge, son of Joseph the judge, son of Obadiah the judge, uh, son of Solomon the rabbi, son of Obadiah the judge. Okay, so there are 2 Obadiahs, and that is more than any third generation Jew can ever tell about their family, probably. Um, yeah. Maimonides studied Torah under his father, who had in turn studied under the Rabbi Joseph ibn Migash, a student of Isaac al-Fasi. At the early age, Maimonides developed an interest in sciences and philosophy. Back when Jews were learning those things, then in Israel there's a problem because now not all Orthodox Jews will be able to learn mathematics or philosophy or the things that made Jews renowned in the world as great thinkers amongst many others and allow them to kind of have a meaningful life also in exile. That's not going to be for a lot of Orthodox Jews in Israel right now, which is quite frightening when I think about, you know, our connection, both our connection to religion and our connection to the world in general. Um, you don't have to be great in math. I have dyscalculia, but it's like you at least to have the ability to be exposed and to make a choice whether you like it or not. He read Greek philosophers, those Greek philosophers accessible in Arabic translations, and was deeply immersed in the sciences and learning of Islamic culture. He was revered for his personality as well as his writings. He led a busy life and wrote many of his works while traveling or in temporary accommodation. Okay, so here's another Jupiter. So we had Hanesher Agadol, the great eagle. So this is prominent Jupiter, which I probably won't see like Jupiter on the midheaven or anything like that because I don't have the year and I don't have like, yeah. But what I busy life or something very busy, it can come from Saturn, from dedication. Of course, I'm tempted to say houses, but I cannot because we don't have it. So it's again this Saturn Jupiter, okay? Dedication, writing on the go, studying on the go, traveling, doing things while traveling, writing while traveling, um, and that can be displayed with Saturn Jupiter. Um, I don't think he was like exiled, so it's probably not a Neptune thingy. Um, it was within Northern Africa and Spain, so it's kind of like the Middle East. Was it considered what we would consider Neptune today? Like, I don't know, maybe, because you didn't travel all that much. But he did, and that's just the Jupiter Saturn thingy going on there. Um, of course, traveling has to do with the moon. Of course, it has to do with the third house. Um, writing, Jupiter always the beautiful moon is almost full. It's not full just yet, but it's almost full. It's beautiful Sagittarius moon. So honoring Sagittarius today. Um, yeah, temporary accommodation. Again, it's not something I can do without houses, and there's no point to try to predict houses with that. Writing per se is a mercurial profession. Okay, to be a person of the word, you have to have a Mercury prominent. Um, but would I be able to do that without signs? Mercury prominence. Well, there can be a harmonious aspect between Saturn and Mercury because that would give us a person who dedicates his life to writing or to the written world and also to oral, okay, stories, to tell stories. So I'd expect Saturn to be harmoniously related with Mercury. Of Berber dynasty, the Almohads conquered Cordova and abolished the Dhimmi status, which is protection on Muslims, in short through payment of tax, the jizya. The jizya. Um, so basically, Jews were buying their way into safety by paying taxes, and that was abolished at the time at 1148 in some of their territories. The loss of status forced the Jewish and Christian communities to choose between conversion to Islam, death, or exile. So he was exiled. Many Jews were forced to convert, but due to suspicion of the authorities for fake conversions, the new converts had to wear identifying clothing that set them apart and made them subject to public scrutiny. Okay, and Maimonides chose exile. So exile, well, exile is 12th house. We don't have houses, and the, this is an intricate thing to predict, and I want to explain to you why. Because exile is something that we see in the 12th house. I remember when I was looking even whole sign houses, we were given a chart to guess. Okay, in the Israeli community, we're given a chart just to guess who is this person. And I was looking at the chart and I saw 12th house stellium. I saw about, well, I don't know, but it seems like this person was probably third generation. He went through exile, but it probably came to Israel because it seems like the exile was his home. There was connection to from his fourth house. Exile is home, so it can be that he as a Holocaust survivor or exiled before the Holocaust. and so exile became his home. So you see this fourth house, 12th house connections. If I'm not mistaken, he also had this. So I made an episode in Spirit of Matter about Georg Kreisler and those 12 house significations. Now, because I cannot have the house here, right? Then I want you to understand, because you can have Cancer 12th house. Okay, if you are ascendant Leo, then Cancer 12th house, and that would mean that the ruler is the moon. And so, if you have moon in the fourth house, it can simply be that exile is your home, or you have, let's say, the ruler of the fourth house in the 12th house, so your exile is your home. Okay. When Mercury was going through my 12th house, and Mercury is the ruler of my fourth house, at the time of COVID, with Saturn in my 12th house, then I was in exile. Okay, I escaped my motherland due to violence, and I was in exile. Okay, I was a sort of a refugee in my own fatherland. Okay, so that was the fourth house became the exile. There was a connection between the exile place and the homeland. I was in exile, but I was in my fatherland. I was checking to see maybe the welfare there can be more useful than the welfare here. And to some degree it was, because of COVID. Okay, there were shelters that are better. And to some degrees it wasn't. Of course, there are many things to fix, including human trafficking and who gave the order to kill the Frisa. So, because I don't have the houses, it means that yes, I can say maybe Neptune. Okay, because Neptune has to do with the kind of journey you make, sometimes fated. Okay, you're forced to travel. Neptune gives you things that you just surrender. Okay, so it just brings something, you surrender to it. And um, I'm just looking at the moon. And it can be that there is some involvement of Neptune within the life path. So that can be ruler of the ascendant, but we don't know what the ascendant. Okay? So what I would expect um, in that, like, it depends on how exile affected him. Okay, and let's look at this, because his family chose exile. The question whether Maimonides himself was among those who had to convert to Islam in order to save his life prior to fleeing the area had been subject to scholarly debate. So that we don't know if he was supposed to actually turn into Muslim, okay, convert his religion, or at least visibly convert his religion. Um, this forced conversation was ruled legally invalid under Islamic law when brought up by a rival in Egypt. Okay, so Islamic law forbade to question, um, forbade the discussion. It's like, we're not going to talk about this. Okay, you must understand that according to this, he was a scholar. He was quite accepted in his birth. I think it was Morocco. So he was quite accepted in Morocco. And the fact that some Hitler-like person comes and kind of terminates the ability of people to be in another faculty of thought or belief, does not mean that the people who were very well renounced do, do not get a certain kind of, like, the regime that might not want to mess with these people. But this could become completely other case. For the next 10 years, Maimonides moved about in southern Spain and the North Africa, eventually settling in Fez in Morocco. So wait. He was not born in Morocco. He was born in Cordova. Oh, I'm sorry. From Spain. He was expelled from Spain. So, in Fez, Morocco. During this time, he composed his acclaimed commentary on the Mishnah during the years 1166 and 1168. Some say he's so this is only 2 years, 3, okay, when he wrote Mishnah Torah. I don't think you understand. It's like an encyclopedia, okay? It's not a book. It's not 300 pages. It's like encyclopedia. So it took him 3 years to write this book. Maybe he had Saturn in Pisces back then. I don't know. Some say that his teacher in Fez was Rabbi Yehuda HaKohen Ibn Suzan until he was killed in 1165. Following this sojourn in Morocco, he lived in Palestine with his father and brother before settling in Fustat in the Fatimid Caliphate, controlled Egypt by 1168. There is mention that Maimonides first settled in Alexandria and moved to Fustat only in 1171. While in Cairo, he studied yeshiva attached to a small synagogue, which now bears his name. In Palestine, he played at the Temple Mount. Okay. Wrote that this day of visiting the Temple Mount was a day of holiness for him and his descendants. So shortly after, he was instrumental in helping to rescue Jews taken captive during the Christian Amalric of Jerusalem siege of the southeastern Nile Delta town of Bilbais. He sent 5 letters to the Jewish community of Lower Egypt, asking them to pool money together to pay for ransom. The money was collected and then given to 2 judges sent to Palestine to negotiate with the Crusaders. The captives were eventually released. So he collected money to pay ransom in order to save people from being held captive by Christians who began to take over. This was a time of religious wars, which unfortunately, we are now at the times, as I'm doing this video, and perhaps because I didn't do it, usually I start every episode with looking into the current planets. I didn't do it this episode. And so, yeah, although the Ascendant, it has been 40 minutes into this episode. Funnily enough, I checked when the midheaven is right on my when the ascendant is on my midheaven, a degree away from my midheaven, and moon 7 degrees Aquarius. Okay, growing moon. We are, I believe, a day before the full moon. Yeah, Pluto 0 degrees. Aquarius, getting closer to ingress to Capricorn as retro. Venus opposing this, 28 degrees Cancer. Mars in Leo, Lilith in Leo. The nodes, respectively, not Sagittarius, Scorpio and Taurus. So the nodes right now, and Jupiter away from Rahu. Okay, from the Jupiter Rahu in Mercury in Taurus, only a degree away from Uranus. So Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces, Chiron in Aries. And as I'm checking this, the midheaven is Venus ruled, and the IC is Mars ruled, with Mars in the 9th house. So right now we're at the time of Jupiter Rahu, and Jupiter is separating from a square to Pluto. Okay, religious transformation. That is somewhat of a crisis. Okay, somewhat of yeah, and so it's timely to take a look at other times where there were literally religious wars. Okay, like I said, right now in Israel, the land of the Jewish people, Orthodox Jewish people, will not get immediate access to be able to study mathematics, philosophy, what we call core studies. And you don't have to be good in mathematics. Like I say, I have dyscalculia. It doesn't mean that I don't know how to appreciate um, certain mathematicians that made a contribution. Doesn't mean that I don't know how to talk to you about fractals. It doesn't mean that I don't know the basics of the two-slit experiment. It doesn't mean that I don't know the basic of certain number groups, or the basics of the Gödel theorem. You don't have to be a genius. Just to be exposed to these things can help you with certain analogies and certain source of centering, um, that's beyond making simple calculations, which I have dyscalculia. Okay, I just discovered that I thought that I still have 50 pounds that were supposed to take me to the bus, and I miscalculated, and so I'm like in this situation where I am right now. But it is so important to be exposed to different faculties of thoughts that facilitate also recognizing God. Okay, and that is just one example. On the other hand, the Sunni and the Shia began to speak together, so that is Iran and Saudi Arabia. And on the one hand, you could say, well, this is blessed, the Sunni and the Shia. But then what is the relation to women? How are women are going to be treated? How is LGBTQ going to be treated? Is there messianic aspirations or a desire to impose a unification of religion? Or, like, we don't know. This could turn out to so many directions. And so they were looking at the chart of a person who lived during times where there was religious disputes. And yes, Pluto in Aquarius, it was also the time, and I'm thinking Dan waits for that, when we talk about the Spanish Inquisition. Okay, those are the times, okay? Um, so, at many times in history, people had to hide their religion for fear of survival. Okay, so hide their religious practices for fear of survival. And you know, I was in Netherlands, right in front of the shelter. I was visiting a church, and then there was a graveyard, and in the graveyard there were buried many people under a cross. But do you think all of them were Christians from those times? Absolutely not. And literally they said to me, you have no idea how many of us are Jews. Okay, and they made me do like the cross 3 times. So I did the cross 3 times. Christians, it's no problem, also Paul-Civilianist. But um, and then they said, you have no idea how many of us are Jews. Okay? This is something that we need to, and you're visiting a graveyard, okay? Whether you're Muslim, whether you're Jew, or whether you're Christian, there are other methods of grieving in other religions. It doesn't mean that all the people buried there are Muslims, or that all the people buried there are Jews, or all the people buried there are Christians. Okay, there are all kinds of it, all kinds. I don't even know entirely about my Christian side of the family if they are all Christians. Okay, I don't know that. I'm not gonna say a lot. Like, I'm not gonna say a lot about this, but because I have relatives who are working for a church, but it's something that you never know. You never know. My grandfather, he was saved because he looked Irish. So he went out of the concentration camp, he brought food, and then he went back in to bring food to the people. He could do that because he looked Irish. Okay, he didn't look Jew, right? What does it say about my family? He was reading Psalm every day. Of course, he was Jewish, but what does it say? Maybe somebody in the family was not Jew, and that's why he had these looks. Huh? We don't know. Okay. Um, So yeah, that did not save him from a concentration camp or from losing 16 members of his family. So there we have this, okay, the death of his brother, which I guess would be more relevant for people doing like zodiac releasing or time techniques, which again you need ascendant. So um, his brother drowned in the Indian Sea with money that was belonging to many people. He was left with a little daughter and a widow. That's the daughter of his brother. He fell ill for a year, for suffered from a sore boil, fever and depression. So heat-related disease along with depression. So yes, this heat-related inflammation is very much Martian, uh, but you know that can tell about grieving. That can tell that either Mars or Aries or Scorpio are in his 6th or 12th house. Again, no, not a way to make sure that this is true. About 8 years have passed, but I am still mourning and unable to accept consolation. How should I console? He grew up on my knees. He was my brother and he was my student. So this very, very intimate connection of both brother and brothers. I think Mars rules brothers and probably also Mercury. So we're gonna have a Mars Jupiter because, or Mars Saturn, because his brother was his student. This can also be brother was his student. So maybe it can be Mars in Pisces or Sagittarius that are Jupiter ruled. And 1171, Maimonides appointed the Nagid, the Egyptian Jewish of the Egyptian Jewish community. Arabist Shlomo Dov Goitein believes the leadership he displayed during the ransoming of the Crusader captives led to this appointment. So he became the Nagid. Okay. However, he was replaced by Sar Shalomon ben Moses in 1173 over the controversial course of Sar Shalom's appointment, during which Sar Shalom was accused for tax farming. Maimonides communicated and fought with him for several years until Maimonides was appointed Nagid in 1195. Okay. A work known as Megillat Zuta was written by Abraham ben Hillel, who writes, Zuta again reminds me of the Jewish Council. When you hear a half smile, it means I remember the satire. Who writes a scathing description of Sar Shalom while praising Maimonides as the light of the East and the West, unique master, and marvel of generation. Okay, light of the East and the West. So there's a unification here. When I hear, it can be something as literal as Sun is in Pisces. Why am I saying that? Because Pisces is about dissolution of boundaries, or Sun Neptune. Because Pisces dissolution of boundaries and light of the East and the West is basically solar. Okay, solar. So it can be something like Jupiter Leo or Sun Pisces. Okay, light of the East and West. Or it can also be Sun on Aldebaran, because Aldebaran is Jupiter ruled, and Jupiter also ruled Pisces, and not Aldebaran, sorry, Antares. And Antares is also, no, it can also be Aldebaran or Antares, because both of them are the protectors of the East and the West respectively, if I'm not mistaken. So this very Jupiterian, like the very Jupiter, and Antares is also the nature of Jupiter and Mars. I don't think I will have anything to be able to do so. Well, the sun cannot be there because the sun is in Aries, which is Mars ruled. So I know the sun exalts in Aries, so it can be a sun that is actually 9 degrees Aries, but like a really exalted sun. But the direction thingy, maybe Mars on Taurus, I don't know, or the something Neptunian, because there's this dissolution. It can also be Sun Neptune, but because we don't have the year, okay, I can tell by sign, maybe by sign. It doesn't move very much, and so whenever the sun hits Aries, some sort of a trine or even conjunction. Why conjunction? Because there's the light sun of the east and the west, okay, of all directions, and that can be a time where Neptune was Aries. Okay, think about Neptune in Aries as ultra religious ideation and devaluation. So religious wars and exile due to religion. Okay, because Neptune, I do treat Neptune as ruler Pisces. Okay, and so Neptune is exile. Why do people have exile? Because of beliefs. Huh? Why are you in exile? Because your beliefs identified. And they look at your skin, they look at your gender, they look at your this, they look at your that as a marker for what your worldview is. So, and that can be scientific too. Okay, scientific revolutions. I don't remember Copernicus. I did Copernicus chart. I need to look at it again. And I was thinking to look at Copernicus chart again today, actually. So there's something going on today. I don't know. Probably with this full moon. Now I'm beginning to need to go to the bathroom. So he was also a physician. Stop. Okay, I'm gonna make a bit of a. Going to return to record. So I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Okay. Losing my religion. Sorry, I had to sing that. Anyway, physician. With the loss to David's business venture, Maimonides assumed the vocation of a physician. So it's always good to be a doctor if you Like, when in doubt, be a doctor. To become famous, he was to become famous. He had trained in medicine in both Spain and in Fez, so in Morocco and in Spain. Gaining widespread recognition, he was appointed Al Farid, the chief of secretary Saladin, and then to Saladin himself, after whose death he remained physician to the Ayyubid dynasty. To have an autograph from Cairo Genisa with the words in Arabic and the Romance translation, both written in Hebrew script. His medical writings. So Maimonides described many conditions, including asthma, diabetes, hepatitis, and pneumonia, and he emphasized the moderation of a healthy lifestyle. Um, he, his treatises became influential for generations of physicians. And this is true during COVID. I know a lot of people were reiterating the Rambam. Okay, so they were going back to Rambam and reiterating things from basically the 1200s. And then again, there are always pros and cons with that. If I take a look at the many Native Americans that died when the U.S. people, the soon-to-be U.S. people came in, basically Anglo-Saxon, um, a lot of them died simply because they were exposed to different bacteria that they were not used to. And so it was just that killed them. And thus, when you look at the medical teaching that's supposed to hold for a millennia, we are looking at a variety that cannot always be tackled with what we have. So there are all these pros and cons to do that, or to reiterate a millennia teaching, literally a millennia. Okay, we're close to millennia, and and just take it like that times. But then, what should you adopt? What should you not adopt? But then we also do not want to discard it, because sometimes ancient knowledge is just accurate. Okay? Sometimes the ancients are just accurate, and we don't really need to renovate what's not needing to renovate. So yeah. He was knowledgeable about Greek and Arabic medicine, followed by principles of humorism in the tradition of Galen. He did not blindly accept authority, but used his own observation and experience. Julia Best medical writings sought to interpret so that they could become acceptable. Okay, so to interpret works of authority so that they could. It's pretty much like what he did with Mishneh Torah, only to medicine. That's what I seek, is kind of like bridging between the ivory tower and the people, which kind of makes sense. If I get it right. So his interpretations, he was trying to interpret on his shoulders of that he was sitting on, so that people and can learn it more easily, if that is what I'm getting to, which is the same thing he was doing in Mishneh Torah for religion. Maimonides displayed in his interactions with patients attributes that today would be called intercultural awarenesses and respect for patients' autonomy. Hallelujah. Nobody knows about the patient more than the patient. That's something that does not need to be renovated. Okay? Although he frequently wrote of his longing for solitude in order to come closer to God and to extend his reflections, 12 house placements, I don't have any outer planets way to reiterate that or to work with that. Maybe if you have like antishas or stuff like that, but that would necessitate more in traditional planets in place. That is more than we can have, because Jupiter could change 3 signs at a time, and the closest we have is Saturn. Okay, Mars could be anywhere, Sun could be anywhere. Sun is probably, Sun is in Aries. That is only all we know about the personal planets. All the outer planets, all the personal planets could be anywhere. So what we can is do is like this Sun is in Aries. Where would we predict Mars? What would we predict Mars to do with the other planets? So probably has connection with this Jupiter or Neptune, or the Sun to Neptune connection. For all the rest, whatever I'm going to see, because I have a chart with AstroSeek, I don't know, like, and I'm going to look into the chart, like how is this comprised? Okay. He gave over most of his time to caring for others. In a famous letter, Maimonides describes his daily routine. After visiting Sultan Palace, he would arrive home exhausted and hungry. I would find antechambers filled with Gentiles and Jews. I would go to heal them and write prescriptions for the illnesses until the evening, and I would be extremely weak. So, even on Shabbat, he would receive members of the community. It is remarkable that he managed to write extended treatises, including not only medical and other scientific studies, but also some of the most systematically thought through and influential treatises in halacha, rabbinic law, and Jewish philosophy of the Middle Ages. So, religion and medicine, huh? Like horse and carriage. So, and this is something that creates a lot of intricacies when we come to treat people, because yes, your beliefs need to serve your medical state. There's no way about it. But it's not so that I could know what belief is good for you. Only that see in people is that if they have a belief that is good for them or that is helping them, even if it's very different from mine, I could see this belief is helping them. So this is belief that good for that is good for them for their health situation. But some people, the health situation is a part of worldview change. So especially if it's eclipse oriented, or if it's Jupiter oriented, or stuff like that, and then I cannot tell them how to view the world. This is something that I don't believe. Okay, I don't believe I can tell you how to view the world. I think that that each of us came to have their own variation on the canon, and a part of the planets being where they are is the way we see the world, and that is in itself dynamic. So to prescribe from religion, and this is where a patient meets a healer or a doctor, and beliefs play a part, whether you are religious or non-religious. And this is why patient autonomy is so important, because it's freedom of religion that we accept in essence. It's freedom of belief that we accept in essence. Okay, this is why I advocate for non-dual, non-volitional experiences rather than psychosis, which implies that the content of what you're seeing is not real. Says who? Anyway. He would receive members of community, and okay. Joseph Caro later praised Maimonides, writing of him, Maimonides is the greatest of the decisors of Jewish law, and of all communities of the land of Israel and Arabia and of the Maghreb based their practices after him, and he gave him upon themselves as their rabbi. So he wrote the epistles to Yemen in 1172 to 74. Has been suggested that his incessant travail undermines his own health and brought about his death at 69, although this is a normal lifespan. Okay. So incessant trabajo, I don't know if they mean trabajo, which means work, or travel. So it's both, I guess. He's dead. He died at 12 December 1204 or 20 of Tevet, 4965, in Fustat. A variety of medieval sources, beginning with Al-Kifti, maintain that his body was interred near Lake Tiberias, so there is no contemporary evidence for his removal from Egypt. I really love this. It's kind of like, is he buried in Tiberias? What is under this tombstone? And all those, like, I see a satyr in front of my eyes when I see that. Just looking at the grave. I'd like to visit that grave. I would probably get like my guides would probably laugh a lot at me and the whole situation. Um, Today, Tiberias hosts the tomb of Maimonides, on which is inscribed from Moses to Moses and arose none like Moses. Maimonides and his wife, the daughter of Michael ben Yeshayahu Levi, had one child. They don't even say her name. Had one child who survived into adulthood, Abraham Maimonides, who became just this one-liner. Like, no astrology. I don't have a delineation here, but it's like, do you only have one child who survived into adulthood? That's freaking scary and sad. So Abraham Maimonides became recognized as a great scholar in himself. He succeeded Maimonides as Nagid, as court physician, at the age of 18. You think about a person, an 18 years old boy, treating sick people and representing like how the lifespan perhaps was different, but also the responsibilities that you would be given at this age. Oh my God. Throughout his career, he defended his father's writings against all, and I know you would say a lot of people go to the army and army service is mandatory where you live. Yes, it's true. And like the complications of that. Anyway, he defended his father's writings against all critics. The office of Nagid was held by the Maimonides family for 4 successive generations until the end of the 14th century. Again, democracy is nowhere to be seen at that point, so that was something that was the spirit of the times. The statue of Maimonides was erected near the Cordova synagogue. Maimonides is sometimes said to be a descendant of King David, although he never made such a claim. So there's this habit, I guess, in Christianity, when a person is given such great contribution, he's declared a saint. And in Judaism, is declared melech, which basically means king. Um, it's, of course, there is the word tzaddik, but tzaddik is also like, I'm living in an Orthodox village. If somebody wants to address even a kid or even somebody who is a male, then they would say tzaddik, tzaddik, which basically means saint. So tzaddik is saint. But this is more like a kindership way, to kind of a close way, or a close way of appreciation that you turn to a person, that you just want to show appreciation to them. So it's like, Mr., then you would say tzaddik, tzaddik, and so on. Kind of like the religious bro. So, but but I think we also have genius, like Hagaon, which means the genius, which is when somebody's making like a big contribution, so it's considered a genius. Had Sadiq, which is like saint, and yeah, we also have Melech, which, in 2023 I find quite obnoxious. but that's considered like biblical, and people speak in terms of Melech. Like even for the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, people will say he's Melech Israel, and it's like it's a Prime Minister. That's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a Prime Minister. But this notion of the necessity to separate, to have a certain separation from religion and the state in favor of religion and in favor of the state is something that is not widely accepted, okay, in all kind of rabbinical lineages. Although in many, like most rabbis are not the problems, it's more the people. And that's to do with everything from circumcision questioning to like melech and whatnot. So yeah, Mishneh Torah with Mishneh Torah, Maimonides composed a code of Jewish law with the widest possible scope and depth. The work gathers all binding laws from the Talmud and incorporates the positions of the Geonim. Okay, like I said, Gaon, which is here it's post-Talmudic early medieval scholars, especially from Mesopotamia. Okay, Geonim is basically genius. It is also known as Yad HaChazaka or simply Yad, which is the numerical value 14. Again, a number that I've seen a lot. I've seen it actually with, before I got the Mercury talisman that I ordered from Spring Sundry. So, but I've got, like this number was, I seen it around my birthday and I kept it. Interesting. Representing 14 books of the work. The Mishneh Torah made the following Jewish law easier for Jews of his time who were struggling to understand the complex nature of Jewish rules and regulations as they had adopted over the years. This kind of interpreting Judaism for day-to-day practice. Later codes of Jewish laws, Arbaat Turim by Rabbi Jacob ben Asher, and Shulchan Aruch by Rabbi Joseph Caro, drew heavily on the Torah. Both often quote whole sections verbatim, so word per word. However, it met initially with much opposition. Okay, this was what I was looking for. And why was I looking for that? Because I wanted to see, was he doing something renovative that ran into resistance? And that can manifest as both Saturn being in Aquarius, because Saturn of Aquarius is outside the structure. Okay, so just Saturn, if you don't know the outer planets, and you don't, at that time, nobody knew the outer planets. You just work with the traditional planets. So this screams Aquarius placement. This can also be Jupiter in Aquarius. Okay, so just Saturn in Aquarius, because Saturn is very strong in Aquarius. Somebody who will go out of the dogma, but he will create his own telos, his own dogma. Okay, and I think telos is Aristotelian, but I'm not sure. I don't remember. Um, but this is a person who will create his own dogma, his own school, and he will be known. It's also considered the rebel that becomes a tyrant. In this case, the rebel that becomes the convention. Okay, so the modernly, I would coincide that as Saturn-Uranus, because Uranus is very much the chaotic thinking, and chaotic thinking, it's non-linear thinking. Okay, that's like I could go, of course you could do it with Saturn Aquarius, but at any other placement it's the Saturn Uranus. Okay, the Saturn Uranus, and the Saturn Uranus combinations give us various integrations of the new and the old in ways that are rebellious to the group. Okay, I've been looking at the Saturn-Uranus conjunction that we had in Sagittarius. It gave us people like Caitlin Kapak who renovated both skincare and magic astrological magic, and then became a consensus. So it became this quite rigorous, some would say even dogmatic person who, and I'm not saying dogmatic in the sense of like closed-minded, but just like very rigorous, and became from a person that had to push through to create something new to a person that now is the dogma. Okay, now if you make a butter cream, body butter, and you want to put, I don't know, mercury in it, then you would go look and you say, okay, what Caitlin did, okay, let's do it like that and see what happens. Uh, where she was having teacher leaving her and so on and so forth. And this gives us the Saturn Uranus thingy. It's the person that in the beginning they are the rebel, they are the new, but then they go through a very tedious Saturnian way of manifesting, and then as they become older, now they are the dogma. Now if you want to do something different to what Caitlin does with cosmetics or something like that, then she will be the one kind of like, and this is unfortunately something that happens with innovators, and that is both Saturn in like the original of Saturn in Aquarius is the rebel that then becomes the dogma, and the combinations of Saturn Uranus. So Saturn Uranus can be like in Sagittarius, and then a new teaching, a new philosophy, a new worldview. Okay, that is, and I know another person with this conjunction that is doing things related to birth and birthing. It's doing fascinating work. It's very innovative, and they are still looking for their own integration. So, with that, to me, tells that again, this leads to this opposition that he had. So that can be simply Saturn in Aquarius. Another point of opposition is that there can be that Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter. Okay, and that can be many ways. Okay, Uranus in Jupiter sign, which can be both Pisces and Sagittarius. Jupiter in Saturn sign. Okay, he could have a Jupiter Capricorn. Okay, no, nobody tells us that he doesn't have a Jupiter Capricorn. Okay, that he doesn't have that. Mean that. There are also certain degrees in tropical Capricorn that denote, okay, I think it is the 13 degrees or 14 degrees, that denotes a person who is a great scholar, a great teacher. And it can also mean that in Sagittarius, so while that can give delay, but it can also give a very tedious work. But then, all of that modernly, I would expect to see Uranus involved. It can also be Jupiter in Aquarius. I would expect this Jupiter, Saturn in Aquarius, then Jupiter in Aquarius. But I do believe that either he has Uranus in Sagittarius or wherever his Uranus is at, there's a connection to both this Saturn and Jupiter. Alternatively, there's a connection between Saturn and Jupiter, which anyway, it is Uranus that's connecting one of these. So let's look at okay, so I'm going to kind of skip a bit. An oft-cited legal maxim from his pen is, it is better to and more satisfactory to acquit 1,000 guilty persons to put a single innocent one to death. Okay, so there is this question of Jews call it Bet Hillel, Bet Shammai, or Tiferet, which is Chesed and Chesed and Din. Okay, so it's like you have the Sefirot, so you have Chesed and I think it is Din or Gmul, and the combination is Tiferet, which is the heart. And so here was a lot more to Chesed. by this notion. Okay, he was a lot more to Bet Hillel, and that is more compassionate. Okay, it says, I rather let go of 1,000 guilty people and have them running free than to send one innocent person to death. And this is a very a very important notion. Okay, this tells me of a very Piscean quality. What in Pisces, I don't know, but there is some very Piscean. It can be by the merit of Jupiter itself, and again, because we don't have the personal planet, so I cannot tell you moon in Pisces or ascendant ruler, ascendant Pisces or whatnot. But there's something Piscean. I won't be able to validate that. Okay, because whatever you see, maybe you see Mercury Pisces, maybe you see Moon Pisces. I don't know. Those are 3 years. 3 years. The Moon can be anywhere. Mercury can be anywhere. Okay, it's more than the cycle of one Mercury, more than the cycle of Venus, more than the cycle of Mars. Okay, so all that we have, even Jupiter can change three signs, and so I cannot even validate Jupiter. The only thing I can validate is Saturn and the connections to other planets, inner planets. So he argued that executing a defendant on anything less than absolute certainty would lead to slippery slope of decreasing burdens of proof until defendants would be convicted merely according to the judge caprice. Okay, which is what we know as Haskat Chafut, or innocent until proven guilty. Okay, so he was very it was very important to have that, and this is something that we should remember about law in general. It is not the solution to all of our problems, and we must have structure that allow for people to be and live a safe life regardless of some other, things. So a person needs to have resources, needs to have housing, needs to have food, so that they need to be free, and need to be able to protect themselves unthreatened, because this law, it simply means that if you want to kill, if you are killing somebody who hurt you, okay, so those who come, if somebody comes to kill you, you rise first and you kill them first, then by this law it means that you are innocent. Okay, you cannot be blamed for murder until it's 100% proven that you intended to kill this person and they did not hurt you. Okay, so let's say you killed somebody who, God forbid, raped you. Okay, you are innocent. This is what people need to get. You are innocent. Because a lot of people want to play on that. It's like, how come you speak? How come you this? How come you that? No. According to Rambam, if I killed you, I would be innocent. Then shush your mouth. Let me talk. Let me heal. Huh? You want to be dead? So this is another important thing that we also need to understand on the chesed, okay, and how chesed becomes gmul. Okay, because when you are very compassionate, the implications are that you're also compassionate. You defend yourself. You're also compassionate towards yourself. Okay, and that is why and how you could argue in favor of the Rambam, and why and how you could understand Cheskat Chafut, or the innocent until proven guilty, in cases which is not understood today. Again, there is a lot of discrimination in Cheskat Chafut and in holding a person innocent until proven guilty. Okay, that you say that I was experiencing violence from so and so. Okay, then you are innocent when you say that. You're not guilty. This is very important. Anyway, in philosophical works. Maimonides composed works of Jewish scholarship, rabbinic law, philosophy, and medical texts. Most of Maimonides' works were written in Judeo-Arabic. However, the Mishnah Torah was written in Hebrew, and his edition were commentary on the Mishnah and begin Sefer HaMitzvot, 113 mitzvot, Sefer Hashamad, letter of martyrdom. Martyrdom is a very Neptunian word to me. The guide for the perplexed. I'm trying to think about the name of this. The guide of the perplexed. So Aristo and Jewish theology. Yeah, I don't know how to delineate that name astrologically. Perplexed. What would you say in astrology is perplexed? What planet would you associate perplexed to? Teshuvot, which is answers. Answers like in, if you become religious, you say choser b'tshuva or bal tshuva, which means you have an answer that is from God. Hilchot ha-Yerushalmi, so that the ways of the Jerusalem Talmud. His medical work. Okay, so more important medical works is Guide to Good Health, Regimens Sanitatis, which he composed in Arabic for the Sultan al-Afdal, son of Saladin, who suffered from depression. So think about this, sanitation and depression. Many things that we ascribe to botanists and biologists and microbiologists were already known in the times of Islam, because Islam is paying a lot of attention to sanitation, a lot of I don't know how to say like the equivalent to like halacha or mitzvah of Islam has to do with cleansing and cleaning, and Judaism is very much inspired, but it's very strange to say inspired because Islam was after Judaism. But when we talk about Mishnah Torah, we talk about a person who was inspired by Islamic thinkers, then he reintegrated that into the Mishnah Torah, into the Judaism. So the Judaism now becomes inspired by Islam, where it came before Islam, but as we go through certain revelations and Jewish people live around Muslims, then they are affected by the thinkers and they bring things into Judaism. But just think about the fact that the connection between depression and sanitation. One of the C factors now in the 2020s, do we look at between gut health, and even then, not all medical people look at that. Gut health and depression, what we eat, how we eat it, and so on and so forth. And of course, our lifestyles, are we respected, our opinions respected, our boundaries, and so on. The work was translated into Latin and published in Florence in 1477, becoming the first medical book to appear in print there. Very interesting, because it would be interesting to look at the chart of that work if there is one. While his prescriptions may have been become obsolete, his ideas about preventative medicine, public hygiene, approach to the suffering patient, and the preservation of health of the soul have not become obsolete. Maimonides wrote 10 known medical works in Arabic that have been translated by the Jewish medical ethicists. I'm beginning to understand what did somebody say? Because I thought about Rambam. Okay, no, it's just stuff. Anyway, because I've been writing about a lot of topics like from medicine to finances to religion, and I guess that brought that. But that's a very big compliment. Um, Tenon works in Arabic that have been translated by Jewish medical ethicist Fred Rosner into contemporary English. Lectures, conferences, and research in Maimonides, even in recently in 21st century, have been done at medical universities in Morocco. Okay, so Regimen Sanitatis, the art of cure, extracts from Galen, comment Hippocrates, so Hippocrates, may food be thy medicine, which is also a Rambam blessing. Um, uh, Medical aphorisms of Moses, treatise on hemorrhoids. Okay, so this is, oh wow, I need to read this. Pluto and Scorpio generation, like with what he wrote about hemorrhoids. What did he write about bum holes? Anyway, so treatise on cohabitation, okay, contains recipes as aphrodisiacs and anti-aphrodisiacs. Also, I guess it's about sex between people, cohabitation, like intimacy, and so like to regulate sexual energy. This is fascinating, and it appears in 1984, the year I was born. Treatise on asthma, treatise on poisons and their antidotes, so early toxicology, textbook, regimen of health, discourse of the explanation of fits, healthy living and avoidance of overabundance. It probably means like what the Christians call gluttony, but yeah, but it's just like it's very weird to say the word gluttony when we understand emotional eating today, because it's not gluttony. Anyway, glossary of drug names represent a pharmacopoeia with 405 paragraphs with the names of drugs in Arabic, Greek, Syrian, Persian, Berber, and Spanish. The oath of Maimonides. So do you know the Hippocrates oath in medicine? Here's kind of the oath. The medical oath basically is the Hippocratic oath that you have to take when you are a medical person. Um, I so Maimonides has his own oath, which is about medical calling and recited substitute for the Hippocratic oath. It is not to be confused with the more lengthy prayer of Maimonides. These documents may not have been written by Maimonides by later. The prayer first appeared in print in 1793, and 1793 was, I think, Pluto and Aquarius too, and has been attributed to Marcus Hertz, a German physician, pupil of Immanuel Kant. Yeah. Immanuel Kant, I believe, already had Pluto in Aries. I'm not sure. Treatise on logic. He's just a fascinating person. Has been printed 17 times, including editions in Latin, German, French, and was Ventura by Remy Braug, in English by Israel Efros, and in a rich Hebrew form. The work illustrated the essential of Aristotelian logic to be found in the teachings of the great Islamic philosophers such as Avicenna and above all Al-Farabi. The second master, first master being Aristotle. In his work devoted to treatise, this is why, those things are why I'm possibilist, because you can see the unity in all religions as well as the precious diversity that is very needed to understand the intricacies and the shades. It's like I think about the painting and you think about the colors. When you blend the colors, then you have all these shades, and all these shades are different variations on the canon, the different belief that the art and science of what comprises the world, and that can be very much enjoyed by possibilities. Of course, we need the Orthodox to preserve tradition and to be pillars of certain color, okay, of a certain green, of a certain, yeah, of a certain green, and the possibility blends the colors and enjoys the paintings with the myriad of perspectives. That is an interesting path to be on, and it's a path that I'm very very glad to take on and to have the honor to partake in this life. Again, the number 14. Wait. This indicates a line of conduct for the reader who must read the text keeping in mind Al-Farabi's work. In Hebrew versions, the treatise is called the Word of Logic, which describes the bulk of the work. The author explains the technical meaning of the words used by logicians. Um, so again, bridge between the Orthodox in whichever field to common knowledge. Uh, yeah. By the way, it was one aspiration of mine. I know that in practice, I have a way to go. I can delineate why, but it doesn't solve the issue. The word of logic, which describes the bulk of the work, the treatise duly inventories in terms of use by logician and indicates what they refer to. The work proceeds rationally through a lexicon of philosophical terms to a summary of higher philosophical topics. 14 chapters corresponding to Maimonides' birth date of 14 Nisan. Okay, Nisan, the beginning of the astrological year. Number 14 reoccurs in many of Maimonides' works. Each chapter offers a cluster of associated notions. The meaning of the words illustrated with examples. At the end of it draws up the list of words studied. Wait, okay. Let me try this again. He had 14 of Nisan, so that was his Hebrew birth date, 14 of Nisan. Okay. The number of, so meaning of the words. Okay, so he mentions the number 14 a lot. For those of you numerology, until very recently, it was accepted that Maimonides wrote the treatise on logic in his 20s or even in his teen years. Teen years seems more likely to me that he would write that. Because when you are a teenager, then you rebel stuff, and logic is the first thing you run into because many people want you to obey their own logic. And when you're a thinker, you're like, but this is not logic. Or people would say, one of the things, think about ad hominem. Okay? So ad hominem, it's like you don't want to do it and ad hominem because you want to deal with the argument and not with the person saying the argument. But if I don't understand why you're saying what you're saying, which is ad hominem, then I might deal with your argument, but I did injustice to you because your argument is very valid relative to the point that you are speaking it. There's a good reason for you to think what you think. And what my argument is might not apply to you. And so ad hominem is needed in order to have a fruitful discourse. But then you don't want to gaslight because of that, okay? That's just, it's just, and on the other hand, you want to be aware, okay? You want to be aware that the person who invented the paradigm I call the like Nikurori, which is used for the alienation of and the other parent in children. You want to know that he and his wife were pedos, and that they invented this paradigm with the context of not believing the child when they talk about pedophilia. Okay, you want to know that because you don't want to use the exact term when you are referring to something like a parent alienating the child from the other parent, which has nothing to do with pedophilia and is a real problem when people make, when people divorce. So you would say ad hominem, okay, right? And so logic is the first thing that you tackle when you grow into the adult world. So I would predict his logic work to have more um, teenage years, but it can be also the 20s because they are like the late teenage years. Herbert Davidson raised questions about Maimonides' authorship of this short work and of other short works traditionally attributed to Maimonides. He maintained that Maimonides was not the author based on the report of two Arabic language Western investigators in Asia Minor. Okay, who is this? Of these short works, so the work on logic. Oh, Rabbi Joseph Kafi mentioned treatise by Maimonides and newly translated into Hebrew as Bi'ur Melechet HaHigayon. Bi'ur Melechet HaHigayon. So the clarification of the work of logic from Judeo-Arabic. So whether it was Maimonides' work or not, this is what he believed relative to logic, and that is what we can take from that. Philosophy. Yes, it's going to be a long episode, and thank you for watching, staying with me. I do want to go over it because I am secular Jew and I didn't know all this. So, let alone people who are watching this and don't have any traditional education. It may be that you're a Christian and you know more about the Rambam than me because you're just learning that type of studies. But other than that, we're probably learning this together for the first time. So I do want to dedicate the entire thingy to actually go over who the Rambam was, what was his contribution, and I made some predictions in the beginning, and we can only see very little from his actual chart. So we're going to concentrate on his contribution. Philosophy. Through the Guide for the Perplexed, which was initially written in Arabic as Dalalat al-Hayrin, okay, hope I'm doing it right, and the philosophical introduction to sections of his commentaries on Mishnah, Maimonides exerted an important influence on the scholastic philosophers, especially Albertus Magnus, Thomas Aquinas, and Duns Scotus. He was a Jewish scholastic, educated more by reading the works of Arab Muslim philosophers than by personal contacts with Arabian teachers. He acquired an intimate acquaintances not only with Arab Muslim philosophy but also the doctrines of Aristotle. Okay, so he was a young boy, Jewish, reading Muslim thinkers and then renovating Mishnah or like the commentary on Jewish halacha or the commentary on Jewish law with inspiration by Muslim philosophy and by Aristotle. So, hey, that's really fascinating. Maimonides strove to reconcile Aristotelianism and science with the teaching of the Torah. Okay, so spirit and science, not an irrelevant theme. In his Guide for the Perplexed, he often explains the function and purpose of the statutory provisions contained in the Torah against the backdrop of the historical conditions. Okay. Maimonides is said to have been influenced by Asaph the Jew, the first Hebrew medical writer, and by Al-Ghazali, a prominent Persian philosopher. The book was highly controversial in its day and banned by French rabbis who burned copies of it on Montpellier. Okay, this is the Rambam. Oh my God, this is why I'm getting this. Okay, because okay, the Rambam in our day and age is a pillar to everything. Trying to fast for the first time in my life, reading some, I think it was me who said that. Okay, I don't know. And so I was reading about, I didn't even know who said that, but I remembered clearly that I was reading about the doubt as strengthening faith. So the person who has doubt, who questions God and who questions things, is not a person who is a heretic, but a person who is a part of their path to question God, in order to be in this path of faith. And so the questioning was scientific. Um, and I became atheist with the strengthening. And I always said, well, what gave me the strength to go with this road was actually a thinker. The philosophers that I was looking into were a priest, Kant, you know, and yeah, and that was something that I had the privilege as a 12-year-old girl to grow up into, embracing both the questioning of science and the tshuva and the knowledge or the answer of the religious. Okay, which eventually I would grow up in my later 20s and my 30s into embracing pragmatism and its relation to medicine. So the pragmatism is a humanistic philosophy that basically wanted to bridge the gifts of religion as gratitude, as faith, and optimism, and a sense of purpose, the kind of the Jupiterian facet of religion, and the scientific doubt and the scientific questioning of what is the implication of my belief. Okay, and think about how that applies to medicine. So this is all of my teachings basically. And I had the privilege to be able to do so. Okay, so the Rambam and this was by a person that I didn't even know his name, and then somebody told me, oh, well, Rambam said it at the 12th century. This was the Rambam. Okay, so he affected my life so ways that I didn't even understand, because I was writing, when I was 11, when I was 12, I was writing theological philosophy for myself. I don't even have that, but I was writing theological philosophy, kind of comprising my own view on religion. And then I took a part, and my Saturn in ninth house is retrograde, Jupiter in Saturn sign retrograde. So that means a part of a native that will go away from the religion that they were indoctrinated by to reintegrate it at an older age, reintegrate faith at an older age from a point of a person who has been a skeptic. So it is very much like divine guidance that I was given to allow for this path to be by a person that I didn't even know. It's Rambam. Okay? And the notion now, Rambam is so, is, you cannot, like, when you say Rambam, it doesn't matter where you go. You're speaking the name of a person who's like a saint. It's the pillar of everything Judaic. It's the pillar of when you go to a rabbi and you consult about medicine. It's the pillar of, or so many things about halacha and whatever. But I'm not a religious, like I'm not Orthodox. So now it's so conventional and it's so basic, right? And so worshipped. But at his time, he was banned. And this is something that is so important for us to remember, because whenever we come to speak, you need to find, if you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, you need to find your own Rambam, because whenever you want to say your word, whenever you want to speak up, whenever you have your own renovations about spirituality, about religion, know that many imams and many priests, they probably agree with you, but they have problems to say that to the people. And it's you when you have this thinker that you can refer to. So in science I could say Copernicus, but here in religion, when you talk about religion, then it's easy to say the Rambam, because Rambam was banned, and now how we look at him. Rambam was banned for saying these things, for trying to combine Aristotle and the Torah and science and this and like he was banned for that by who? By the Orthodox. And him as something that is so essential to Judaic philosophy without saying Rambam. He's not. And and this is Jew, then of course you can always take the Rambam and whatever it is that you have to say that is in the spirit of humanism or womanism. Okay, now with this man, and of course we are more inclusive now, fortunately. But whatever you have to say, this is in the spirit of um, the person in the spirit of in favor of humanity, in the spirit of inclusiveness, in the spirit of taking inspiration from in the spirit of possibilityism. Let's face it, okay? In the spirit of possibilityism, and you have to say it in your religion, whether you're a Jew, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Muslim, or you're Hindu, or you're whatnot, then you need to find your own Rambam. Because when somebody tells you, how dare you say, well, he said, we would not be saying anything that we say today if not for the Rambam. And the Rambam was banned in his days. He was sent to exile, but he was not only sent to exile, it was rabbinic Jews that were banning his scriptures, that were banning his teachings. And this is the pillars of Judaism, why he was inspired also by Islam. And you say, how come Jews came before Islam? Well, they were not afraid. What kept us, for you can say Jews, but for this case, but for you, it can be Hindus, it can be Christians, it can be whatnot. So the scholars that kept adaptable. Think about the Babylonian Empire. The Babylonian Empire, when they conquered, it was probably like I'm not going to idolize empire and colonialism, but when they conquered people, they were seeking to learn from the people because they understood that these people, they don't come to educate them alone. People, they have wisdom. And so a part of conquering is like, let's get to know this wisdom and integrate it into the wisdom of Babylon. Survival and the ability to adapt, it requires divergence, not racism. Okay, not purification of the race, Hitler, which is a mistake. Okay, regardless of atrocities, it is also a mistake because you need divergence. Look at the land. Why everybody studies permaculture? Because when things grow together, they help each other. Then they are exposed to each other. The immune system is stronger. Why in Finland they send children now to play in nature? And Finland is quite cold, huh? It's like many degrees below zero, but they do all the efforts that they can to bring nature to children. Why? Because it strengthens the immune system. Because when you are exposed to diversity, whether in nature, in bacteria, or in religion, in philosophy, as above, so below, then you can be a stronger, more resilient person, more open-minded person. Because you say, hey, maybe I don't agree with you about this, but here there is something that we can agree about. Or hey, there is something that I can learn from you. Maybe you did something to me that was horrible, but hey, there is something you did that can be good, that I can adopt and I can learn from that. Okay? And you can learn from me not to do this horrible thing. And we totally need that to survive as humanity, of whichever we need the divergence, we need the different point of view, we need to learn from each other, and yes, it includes the dot friction and the tolerance that we need, but we will not make it if we try to purify the race. If we only try to purify, there will always be these people who are the pillars of the tradition, and it's okay. Yeah, well, like the Saturnian peoples, it is okay. They are called, like, you want to understand what is green, you look at the trees, you look at the leaves, you look at the things that are green in your world. Okay, can you paint the sun green in an impressionist painting? Absolutely. You also want to know that you walk out in reality, you see a tree that has green leaves, and then a bush that has green leaf, and you say, okay, this is green, and the fruit that is not yet ready, then it is green, and you say, okay, this is green. I understand what green means. Then I can make art and I can play with it, and I can paint the sky green, and I can paint the sun green, and I can paint the house green, and that's okay. And it has a meaning and symbol. And so we need both those pillars that hold the frequency of color and the people who blend and play with that, which are the possibilists of the world. So, 13 principles of fate. In his commentary to Mishnah, Sanhedrin, Maimonides formulates these 13 principles of fate, and these principles are summarized as he reviews he's viewed as the required belief of Judaism. So, the existence of God, God's unity and invisibility in two elements. Um, so, this means that uh, it's like the lotus vessel tuna. It's like you do not make a statue or a picture. Um, the reasoning for that is basically to not have a barrier between you and God. Okay, he was affected by Kant. He was affecting Kant. Sorry, affecting Kant. Kant came way after. So that's unity. Okay, that's unity. So that is meaning that even if you don't have the money to buy a talisman, you can still turn to God, and it's not. And this was already Rambam. Okay, this principle entails the Kantian principle and the later Protestant principle that you don't need a mediator to communicate the divine. Elements is also human beings. So think how ahead of his time he was. And who were these Muslims people? Who were these Muslim thinkers? What did they say? Okay, because he was affected by Muslim thinkers. So they were very advanced for their time as well, right? Because he didn't, like, he invented this, but also didn't invent this. God's spirituality and incorporeality, that is, like, again, nobody has a monopoly over the divine, basically. It's like, yeah, this talisman does not have a monopoly over the entity or the divine. Okay, and in Judaism, you cannot make it, like, you're not supposed to do this talisman, you're not supposed to be working with talismans. Like, okay, beseder. Everything is a talisman. This tree is a talisman. This armchair is a talisman. This wheat walk is a talisman. That is how I see it. And then when you add more ritual and more intent to it, then you preserve a certain connection. But again, it's the sense that you don't make maschara, okay? You don't make business out of religion, in the sense, not that you cannot sell things to do with religion, it's that you don't bar people out or price people out of connection with the divine or the experience of divinity, which I ascribe to. God's eternity, okay? God's alone, God. This sounds a bit Quran. God's eternity, God alone should be the object of worship. Okay, it's very much La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, but this is Moses instead of Muhammad. Revelation through God's prophets. La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, it's the same thing. The prominence of Moses among the prophets. This is so reminding me of the first pages of Quran, and I know Quran is not read according to the order, but it just reminds me that it's like I'm reading the Arabic. That's just my experience, that with the limited education that I have about all theology thinking, that the entire Torah, both written oral law, are of divine origin and were dictated by Moses, by God in Mount Sinai. The Torah is given the Torah given by Moses is permanent and will not be replaced or changed. God's awareness. This is almost like a juristic document when you think about it. This this is permanent and will not be subjected to changes or replacements. This is very legal language. God's awareness of all human actions and thoughts. Okay, so God knows what's between the heart and the head of the tzaddik. So that's pretty much this one. But God knows the hearts of people. Reward of righteousness and punishment of evil. So this is not in the spirit of Job. I don't know what did Rambam think about Job. So the book of Job is about a person who basically has misfortune after misfortune after misfortune. God is testing him, and I don't remember if the end of the story is that he got great wealth, but he also had like a lot of misfortunes. So it was like God is testing you, and there was this question of like, how come an evil person gets good things and then a righteous person gets bad things? It's just Rasha v'tovlo or something like that, Tzadik v'ralo or something like that. So, which is a biblical saying as far as I remember. The coming of the Jewish Messiah, Biat HaMashiach. Okay. I guess the resurrection of the dead implies this it implies that either there is no reincarnation or there's some way to access the dead having all these lives all together. So I don't know how is the resurrection of the dead meant. So Maimonides is said to have compiled the principles from various Talmudic sources. These principles were controversial when he first proposed, evoking criticism by rabbis Hasdai Kreskas and Joseph Albo, and were effectively ignored by much of the Jewish community for the first few centuries. However, these principles have become widely held and are considered to be cardinal principles of faith for Orthodox Jews. Two poetic restatements of the principles, Ani Ma'amin and Igdal, eventually became canonized in many of editions of the Siddur Jewish prayer. This was the Siddur. This was what I was reading when I was 12. I think so. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. The omission of a list of these principles, as much as within his later works, the Mishneh Torah and the Guide for the Perplexed, has led some to suggest that either he retracted his earlier position or that these principles are descriptive rather than prescriptive. Again, yeah. So he omits, like, okay, it can be that's it's not a prescription, that it was describing something, and also think of how much of this is literally taken almost word by word from the Quran. So you know, theology. Maimonides reserves to as a necessary being of theology. God is unique in the universe, and the Torah commands that the one love and fear God, deut, on the account of that uniqueness. To Maimonides, this meant that one ought to contemplate God's work and to marvel at the order and wisdom that went into their creation. To love God and to sense how insignificant one is in comparison to God. So this is not the God of Kant. That's important. For Kant, there is God in us, then we can connect with God. Okay, the essence I'm using a non-Kantian word. I think the Dasein was not Kant. Or was it? I'm just so confused. No, the Dasein was. Ah, never mind. Because I'm not sure if I'm repeating concepts or creating concepts, which at this point I could be doing both. To Maimonides, this meant that one ought to contemplate God's work and to marvel at the order and wisdom that went into their creation. When one does this, one inevitably comes to love God and to sense how insignificant, one is in comparison to God. This is the basis of the Torah. So, how one is insignificant to God reminds me of the Christian Lord, I ain't worthy, but like I ain't worthy, but the Lord still loves me, which I find as a holistic health practitioner problematic, especially when you talk about abusive relationships, because it's a relation, and it's important to understand that we are divine and we are worthy, and that we have flaws or that we're not, completely perfect, does not make us any less divine, but rather the divine experience. Or I guess some would say this is closer to Kabbalah, where God is experiencing his or her various phases through humanity and the human experience. And so all is the face of divinity. Um, that's one way to see it. Um, but yeah, I just don't like talking about people as insignificant in comparison to God, because I feel that has contributed to creation of, if humanity is not significant, or if the person is not significant, then atrocities against humanity are not significant, which I don't think is the case. But I'm sitting on the shoulders of great humanists. So yeah. Inspired his philosophical activity was identical to the fundamental tenet of scholasticism. There can be no contradiction between the truths which God has revealed and the findings of the human mind in science and in philosophy. Okay, this is something that I do not necessarily ascribe to. I think that the unity is emerging from what seems to be contradictions, and a natural emergence can only occur when we accept and radically accept contradictions as facets of human thinking, or the human experience. Think about an opposition in astrology, okay? An opposition is a contradiction. Can unity emerge? Maybe, maybe not. And we sometimes have to hold this dissonance. Maimonides primarily, but here it said no contradiction. One of the people that reiterates scholasticism, according to this, is actually Christopher Warnock, where he believes that a faculty of thought or a religious belief needs to have no contradictions, needs to be coherent to its followers. I believe this is more ideal than real. Um, but then the aspiration is humanistic, is from good intent, and it's basically meant to give us a sense of safety and centeredness. So it's not a bad aspiration. This is the question of how do you come about into it, and do you miss intricacies in the process? And that affects our scientific thinking. And when we accept something, or it is basically, because it's affected also by Aristotle, it's also axiomatic thinking, which is uh, problematic, because if you think about the Babylonian reasoning, then you would study a bit here, a bit there, a bit there, and maybe they would emerge to one greater theory, and maybe they would not. But the validity of those sets of laws that you discovered per themselves and in their context was not invalidated by the greater, unless there was another explanation, but it was not required for you to reduce everything to an axiom, which I think made Babylon great. And I think that this is an important facet of thing that we should preserve. And this is how we come to hold what seems to be contradiction, which is not contradiction at all. Is you getting down into this paradox and understand that every set of belief has a context. But this is the way I see it already. Maimonides primarily relied upon the science of Aristotle and the teachings of Talmud, commonly claiming to find the basis for the latter in the former. So, basis for the Talmud in Aristotle. You can see why it was banned, right? Um, but is it not to some degree? Hmm, which came first? That's the question. I don't know how to answer which came first. Maimonides' admiration for the Neoplatonic commentators led him to doctrines which the later scholastics did not accept. For instance, Maimonides was, hey, what are you doing? No, thank you. Yeah. For instance, Maimonides was adherent of apophatic theology. In this theology, one attempts to describe God through negative attributes. For instance, one should not say that God exists in the usual sense of the term. It can be said that God is not non-existent. Oh, okay. One should not say God is wise, but God is not ignorant. Negation as meaning of expression. I don't know how to delineate. This sounds more like mercurial something, but negation. Maybe it's even a Mercury Saturn. One should not say God is one, but he can say there is no multiplicity in God's being. In brief, the attempt to gain and express knowledge of God is by describing what God is rather than by describing God what God is not rather than what is. Okay. Oh well. Maimonides argued adamantly that God is not corporeal. This was central to his thinking about the sin of idolatry. Oh, so God does not participate in adultery. Maimonides insisted all of the anthropomorphic phrases pertaining to God in sacred text are to be interpreted metaphorically. A related tenet of Maimonidean theology is the notion that the commandments, okay, so it's the 613 mitzvahs. No, the commandments is the 10 commandments, especially those pertaining to sacrifices. Okay, this is the mitzvahs, are intended to help wean the Israelites away from idolatry. You slaughter a goat because you don't want to have sex with another woman. Like, does this work? Anyway, verdammt. Maimonides also argued that God embodied reason, intellect, science, and nature, and was omnipotent and indescribable. He said that science, growth of scientific fields, and the discovery of the unknown comprehension of nature was a way to appreciate God. Wait, I need to read this again. Yes. I agree. Character development. Maimon thought about of one's moral character. Although his life predated the modern concept of personality, Maimonides believed that um, each person has innate disposition along an ethical and emotional spectrum. Of one's control, human beings have free will to choose to behave in ways that would build character. He wrote, one is his affairs with others in a gentle and pleasing manner. Gentle, pleasing, gentle, pleasing. Those are Libra words, but I don't know if you understand Libra. Maimonides advised that those with antisocial character traits should identify those traits and then make conscious efforts to behave in the opposite way. Um, an arrogant person should practice humility. If circumstances of one's environment are such that it's impossible to behave ethically, one must move to a new location. Thank you. This is exactly the core of my thinking. Like, it should be allowed for people to move around in space so that they can be better people. Okay, I'm having my Scorpio square, and I'm Pluto Scorpio, my Pluto square. I'm Pluto Scorpio 0 degrees, and now Pluto 0 degrees is exactly squaring my Pluto. And so Scorpio is essence, is transformation, is the nature of the persons. Like, what are you in your nature? And Aquarius is the structure outside the structure. And so the way I see it is that people should be allowed to have a structure. Why do I support having housing or housing first? Is because you cannot maintain a good intimate relationship, a good sexual relationship, if you don't have your own space in spirit and in matter. If you are worried that without this person you will not survive, that without this job you will not survive, that without this you will not survive, so you are too much on the dependence level and too little on the autonomy level. Of course, we are all dependents, we are all interrelated, and we need that in order to be civil, and in order to develop empathy. That being said, when we are too much enmeshed into one another's lives, it's not good for all people, and some people need more space, and they need for that to be allowed in the structure to be, because this structure makes them better people. This is also how democracy is better than Molech, because um, the more decentralized, okay, I'm not saying totally decentralized, like you could do mass shooting and then go someplace else and nobody gives a flying, like, not in that sense, but yes, in the sense of, if you know that right now you're getting angry, or you're feeling antisocial, or you're feeling rage against humanity, then you can go and retreat to your own place and have food there, and have your silence there, and have, your ability to retreat and hug a tree, or feed the birds, or feed a raven, and slowly gather your own space so that you can connect with humanity, and always be able to retreat to you, okay, to have a sense of autonomy. This is structure. Yeah, this is structure. And when that is not granted, then people do not have the basis of what allows them to be good people. And so they are so much so on building character that even like it's almost ableistic not to being human. And that is why we need decentralization and space when we need it. We also need a sense of connection. We also need to be accept divergence, because it is accepting divergence that allows us to be better humanity, rather than persecute people for who they are, basically. Um, so I deeply, 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 deeply relate to that. Okay, if you cannot behave ethically, you need to move to a new location. But this also should be a possibility for you, because if you cannot do this, then what happens? You become violent for yourself or to others. And this new location needs to be safe, because if it is like um, asylum or whatnot, and you know you're going to get hurt there, then you're like, okay, I'm gonna go down, I'm gonna take as many people as with me, like a mass humanity destruction is with me, because I blame humanity for me to put in this situation where I want to be a good person, I want to retreat, I want to have a space of my own, I want to just make sure that I will survive, that everything will be okay with me, and then I will take my time with me, I will be responsible, and then I will connect with humanity when I feel ready to. But this was not allowed, okay? And what was allowed is only to take people to a place where they are being scrutinize or being having violence or being, having medical experience or whatnot, then a person loses their humanity. And we are at this stage right now where we need to be very cautious, and we need to do whatever we can to at least tend to people having resources, people having land, people having, the material things that they need to, and also people being accepted, and people being, having compassion towards people. Yes, speaking up, absolutely. Me too, veteran. Of course, I'm for speaking up. It's part of healing. It's very important, and also allowing a sense of space to be, so that healing and recovery can take place for all people. Prophecy. Maimonides agreed with the philosopher Aristotle that the use of logic is the right way of thinking. He claimed that in order to understand how to know God, every human being must, by study and meditation, attain the degree of perfection required to reach the prophetic state. Okay, so meditating on it, isolation, seclusion as a means to acquire contact with divinity. Where is it sourced from? Is it Muslim? Is it Hindus? I don't know. It reminds me very much of the way Kant would be talking about seclusion as means where you think, and through the logos you can reach the connection with God and you can understand God. But Kant already included I believe the principle that humanity is all, that you are divine. Okay, and that connection to God is in this sense. Despite his rationalistic approaches, he does not explicitly rejects the previous ideas as portrayed by Rabbi Yehuda Levi in Hakuzari, that in order to become a prophet, God must intervene. Okay. Maimonides sees the highest purpose of most learned and refined individuals. Oh, I had no idea. His channeling. What's like, okay, but why is it important? It's fascinating to prophetize. Okay, we do so also scientifically. We think, oh, what will be in 20,000 years? We make predictions with astrology. Um, but why is prophecy something that makes us refined? I think about the notion of time and Saturn as karma. Because if you can predict what is the step that I'm doing today makes in 2000 years, and is this the right step to do, then I have the prediction, and then this prediction allows me to make the good steps, hopefully, and say, okay, I understand that this step may be insignificant now, but in 2000 years and 20,000 years and 30,000 years, it will be very significant that a person made this step upon this earth. And so being able to prophetize for all these times, I can appreciate God because I see my insignificance in the face of that great divinity, which is very difficult to argue with, right? It's the release of the ego, and in that sense I can relate to how we can view it in this way without hurting our intimate relationships. This is a possibility. um, Knowing that we are also divine. But and these proportions can allow in letting go and trusting, and also um, taking the right steps. Because if you can predict what is the right step, and hopefully it's within your means to take the right step, you can predict is good, then the more you can predict a long time, Saturn, or the outer planets, which is even more like Neptune or Sedna, then the more you can predict, then the better person you can be. So I guess this is why we want people to be prophetizing so that they can predict stuff and then they can do the right steps. But that requires understanding that there is some, at least some ability to interfere in your own will. The problem of evil. Maimonides wrote on theodicy, the philosophical attempt to reconcile the existence of God with the existence of evil. He took the premise that an omnipotent and good God exists. In the Guide for the Perplexed, Maimonides writes that all the evil that exists within human beings stems from their individual attributes, while all the good comes from the universally shared humanity. When I was channeling something about evil, I said that the divine is apologizing for cruelty and offers remediation or offers medicine. Okay, the divine is the cruelty was a mistake of the divine, and the divine offers medicine. Um, so it's kind of like there was too much choice given to humanity in this situation. It was not predicted that that would be taking this course, and then the divine offers medicine for that. That was what I received. For me, it was relevant for me. But yeah, he says that there are people who are guided by higher purpose, and there are those who are guided by physicality and must strive to find um, the higher purpose with which to guide their actions. Okay, are guided by higher purpose. There are those who are guided by physicality and must strive to find a higher purpose by which to guide their actions. So this denotes a certain break in spirit and matter, and kind of downgrading matter. Okay. To justify, and this is of course, my perspective, so it's biased, of course. So to justify the existence of evil, assuming God is both omnipotent and omnibenevolent, Maimonides postulates that one who creates something by causing its opposites not to exist is not the same as creating something that exists. Okay, so it's like if I'm demoting you, then it's different than if I am just doing me. So evil is merely the absence of good. But that would denote that the heresy case, God did not create evil, rather God created good, and evil exists where God is absent. But where is God absent? Therefore, all good is divine intervention, and evil both is not and comes secondarily. It reminds me of near-death experiences, and when people describe that the good that they did is so much more meaningful, had so much more impact on the world than the places where the good was absent. And this should be not gaslighting, to excuse for things not okay that we do, but actually something strengthening so that we can become better people. And the more we if we are forgiving towards ourselves, and that leads to make it easier for us to be good people, then it's no problem to be forgiven towards ourselves. But if we are forgiven towards ourselves, and actually it leads to the other road, then and when we are harder on ourselves, then we are better people. Then it means we need to be more hard on ourselves, or the other way around. If we are hard on ourselves, then we become like worse people, which in many cases is the case. A person, like those evil people that we see, in many cases they are very hard on themselves. Very, very hard on themselves. I can give a concrete example of a lawyer that is justifying many people that were accused of sex offense, and It is very clear that they are sex offenders. But she didn't see them as guilty, she saw them as victims. And one day it was a famous singer, and he was molesting teenagers. And the first she said, "Oh, he's an old fart." And then she was basically being hard on herself. Okay, she was reflective, and she said, "Yeah, I remember I said that, but when I think," and she was being reflective, "when I think I would also like to get away with having teenage children having sex with me." Okay, pretty much those were her words. I could, if this is misconstruing, then I apologize, because this is what I read in the news as her quote. But that was her being hard on herself. That was her version of being very hard on herself. She was being reflective. At first, she called him an old fart, but then she said, "No, I would like to for that to happen to me too," and I was just jealous of him. Okay, so she was being self-reflective. Did that make her a better person? Huh? Um, and she's a gets these people out of the situations where they sleep with teenagers and just literally pedophilia, and she does everything to get them out of the situation, and she is from her perspective, she's very hard on herself. So yeah, um, they are not taking into account the extent of positive creation outside of themselves. My reasons is too insignificant to figure God's myriad works to be the primary characterizing force, and so when people see mostly evil in life, they're not taking into account the extent of the positive creation outside of themselves. Maybe, I don't know. Like, I'm correcting my toes right now, so my entire perspective is being corrected. But then it is available. Much people try to say this to me. I didn't understand what they were talking about, and they didn't understand exactly what needs to be changed either. So there was still like channeling, but feed, do things. Maimonides believed that there are three types of evil in the world: evil caused by nature, evil that people bring upon others, and evil man brings upon himself. The first type of evil, he states, is rarest form, which is evil caused by nature, but arguably the most necessarily the balance of life and death in both the human and animal world itself. He recognizes is essential to God's plan. Yeah, for me it was all so irreconcilable, the fact that we consist of consuming God's creation, basically. Like whether it's plants um, or animals or whatnot. It's kind of like nature consists of living creatures consuming other living creatures. And it has been so irreconcilable, because it's like this, the divinity of life, and then life eats another life. She's like, damn. Maimonides writes that the second type of evil is relatively rare, and humanity brings it upon itself. And he talks about evil, which means the people bring upon others. He said humanity brings it upon itself. Yeah, that's the state we are living in. It's like, do we make place for people and divergent people, not on the account of other people? Okay, make place for predators on the account of their prey. No. um, when those are people, again, humanist. So do we accept each other? Do we let each other be ourselves? Because if not, that brings evil. And letting each other be is also allocation of resources. It's also political. It's also land. It's also resources. It's also food. Um, and that is quite important. The balance of life and death. So the third type of evil humanity brings upon themselves, and it is the source of most of the ills of the world. These are the result of people falling victim to their physical desires. To prevent the majority of evil, which stems from harm one does to oneself, one must learn how to respond to one's bodily urges. Okay, I'm way more tantric than him. um, yeah, I think that this is the heart of a lot of sex crimes, basically. I do accept. The first person I heard about this was actually Austin Coppock. He was an old video where he was talking about Mars, and he said that in certain cultures there was the myth of Mars as Mars alone would rape his mother. And shocking as it was, but no, early Austin. Um, then he was mentioning how the difficulty to reign over malicious desires is a very real problem, and I don't see it necessarily as a gender thing, but more as an issue for the people who deal with that. Um, so I'm like, okay, I've like I can stop when I hear somebody saying something from a perspective that is different than I've been exposed to, or that I have um, the ability to validate or refute, and I just believe them. And um, and that being said, I do believe that the tantrics have a lot to offer um, in celebrating the physicality. A person that I met is a person who was inspired by my work on sexual stuff and is nature, who talks about sexuality and releasing sexual shame due to sexual trauma and religious trauma around sexuality. I think that only to say don't be a slave to your desires, as in condemning and overcoming your desires rather than delving into sensual pleasure that is heart centered. And heart centered, I say it for the well being of the body, heart, and soul. Okay, it's the root chakra. Okay, your balls, your anus, your perineum are connected in terms of the chakra, this base chakra, to the heart chakra. If these are two are not connected, then you're gonna have problems with your anus and your heart. Um, and this is something that is important to understand. Just like your second sex chakra, so same as Me Too veteran, um, is related to your throat chakra. So this is why to speak about, if you are a victim of sexual abuse or sexual violation of your boundaries, then to speak up, not by force, not by coercion, but from volition when it comes and when you need to speak up, even obsessively, even compulsively. This is what eventually will align this chakra and will contribute. This is why these voices need to be heard and they need to be validated. Okay, this is not shaming, this is not revenge, this is healing from the the wound that is caused, this medicine. Um, so when I look at the saying of don't be a slave to your desires, of course there is a teaching there, and I don't underestimate that, or self-control or whatnot. But it's very important that we do not cast shame on our sexuality, because that only reiterates on lack of control. Okay, you can coerce somebody into um, into depriving themselves of something that they actually do need. that is human connection, that is sensual connection. Um, and even I remember at the time I was preaching for self pleasure, self pleasure, self pleasure, may self pleasure, this shall. I went and self pleasured myself, and I had astral experiences with other beings. I don't know exactly who they are, what shape they took, but when it was good, it's very grateful. But I was like, I'm telling everybody to pleasure themselves, and then I am pleasuring myself, and I have basically astral sex with something or someone, or I don't know what. So what am I saying? Okay, it's the Schumacher walking barefoot. So that kind of revolutionized my thinking, and kind of got me to understand we need both of this. We need both to have, will and consent consists both of surrender and of finding of respecting our boundaries. Okay, but also to respect. We respect our boundaries in order to be able to surrender, and we to assert our boundaries, we surrender into our bodily needs, which is to defend our boundaries. So that, yeah. True beliefs versus necessary beliefs. Okay. In the Guide for the Perplexed, Book 3, Chapter 28, Maimonides draws a distinction between true beliefs, which were beliefs about God that produced intellectual perfection, and necessary beliefs, which were conducive to improving social order. Intellectual perfection versus social order. Okay. Anthropomorphic personification about circumcision, where a lot of rabbis believe that it's there's nothing Jewish about circumcision. Like that there's nothing that is of unity of God that is not corporal, or that is that has existence beyond the corpus. There's nothing in this notion that implies celebrating that through operations on our physical body. Um, and yet, it's difficult to tell that to people because, just like Abraham, they need something to lean on. It's just like, but why? Like, why make the penis less easy to absorb? Why that? Like, decreasing the sensual pleasure only makes people need to be more aggressive in order to feel something rather than the delicacy and the intricacy of delving into pleasure. And this is where I think that tantrics were right. It doesn't mean that there are no offenders in tantra, not at all. But there are no less offenders whose penis was circumcised. So that didn't work out. Next, yeah, God does not become people, and God has no human passions. But it is important for them to believe God does, so that they desist from doing wrong. This reminds me of something that I heard an imam says about Allah, and it's a very beautiful saying. So basically, God, the way we see God is supposed to help us be better people. And that leads me to a very modern thinker, which was, yeah, it's medicine. She was priestess. Um, I have her face. Okay, it's just she taught medicine, but yeah, okay. No. The one who wrote about the body and the metaphysics of different parts of the body and how to like love your body and have this holistic. Oh well. It's like something like consciously saying, "Don't say her name." Don't say. It was like, okay, but why not? Oh wait, and I don't have her name. Ah, righteousness and clarity. Maimonides conceived of an eight-level hierarchy of tzedakah, where the highest form is to give a gift, loan, or partnership that will result in the recipient becoming self sufficient instead of living upon others. Exactly, a donation is an investment, and an investment is a donation. In his view, the lowest form of tzedakah is to give begrudgingly. The eight levels are giving begrudging. What is begrudgingly? I don't understand. Giving less than you should, but giving it cheerfully. Giving after being asked, giving before being asked, given when you do not know the recipient's identity but the recipient knows your identity, given when you do not know the recipient's identity but the recipient doesn't know your identity. Okay, for me this is a problem. Okay, let's see. Given when neither party knows the other identity, enabling the recipient becoming self-reliant. Okay, I think enabling the recipient becoming self-reliant whenever possible is important, but that only is achieved through knowing the recipient. Because otherwise, you give to funds, and that does not reach to the people. And that's why I say people, not funds. And I always encourage people to do charity to people to get to know the people, because the mostly what people need is to be seen, to be validated, to be acknowledged. Um, and while I appreciate the fact that some funds want to have this lack of connection so that the person who's been given is being respected and not having to deal with the embarrassment of asking, basically. um this is called matan baseter, which is giving secretly, and I appreciate that. It's also important that we don't just give to funds, because it's not don't give to funds, it's just make sure you also give to people. That beggar in the street, yeah, they need, like, you want to help them be self-reliant, sit with them. If you can speak with them, get to know them more, allocate time for them, ask them what they need. They, like, people become self-reliant when you ask them what they need, because then they start thinking about what they're needing. Okay, then that is way more. Giving somebody to be help enabling somebody to become self-reliant is not taking away things from them. Okay, God will do that. Okay, God, for example, I was not able to buy a talisman until I began to do astrological magic myself. I did not have the will to do that, because it was divinely guided for me to be able to do this myself. And I was afraid of it because it's so complicated. But look, I did not become, I did not gain money to learn aromatherapy before I experimented with essential oils myself. Okay, it's those things. And eschatology. Eschatology. This is basically, is this eschatology? It's reading the stars. Okay, his treatise on the Messianic era, written on Judeo-Arabic, which elaborate on the great detail of the commentary of the Mishnah, Sanhedrin, known as Perikles. Okay, I'm sorry. Eschatologia is basically, this is astrology. Like, how was we doing medicine? It was doing probably horror or something. It's just not written. Religious Jews believe in immortality in the spiritual sense. Most believe that the future would include a messianic and the resurrection of the dead. And this is the part of Jewish eschatologia. Okay, so eschatologia, okay, it's just saying, okay, I got it. Maimonides wrote much on this topic, but in most cases he wrote about the quality of the soul for people of perfected intellect. His writings were usually not about the resurrection of dead bodies. Rabbis of his days were critical of the aspect of this thought, and there was controversy over his true views. Okay, issues of life and death, and why you don't have unity in mental care, whatever. Um, Eventually, Maimonides felt pressure to write a treatise on the subject known as the Treatise on Resurrection. Okay, We're only 5 minutes to the chart, and that requires for a lot more. So I will just go to the chart right now, and I will either continue this alone or in another episode. This is the birth chart of um, this is the birth chart of Moshe ben Maimonides, and I don't know how is this chart coming about. This one says April 6th, and so it gives us this Leo ascendant. I don't know why. Of course, Sun in Aries in the ninth house, according to this ascendant, which would make sense. Jupiter is together with Mars, which I somehow predicted because of the definition of God according to the negation, but which I thought was Saturn, but it was another thing, Mars. Jupiter in Taurus. Um, Pluto in Taurus, so he was of Pluto Taurus generation. Saturn in Capricorn. I predicted Saturn to be in Aquarius, but Saturn is actually in Capricorn. Saturn, of course, trines Mercury, which is expected. Mercury in Taurus, if that is true. Okay, so again, Mars, Mercury, if that is at all true. Uranus and Neptune, not conjuncting, but not too far from conjunction in Libra. So Uranus Neptune is interesting here. And of course, Sun oppositions this Uranus Neptune. So I said something with Sun and Neptune. Um, and there is, if it's true, then there is this in conjunct to Jupiter, which would give us the Jupiter Uranus thingy. But Saturn Uranus is not applied, it's more through Jupiter. So Jupiter is aspecting this Uranus, if this is truth. Jupiter is in conjunct with, by sign, Jupiter is in conjunct Uranus, but Jupiter does not see Saturn. It's trining Saturn by sign, okay? So again, we don't have the exact time. If Jupiter is indeed in Taurus, so it is in conjunct in Uranus and Neptune, and it trines Saturn by sign. And it's reasonable for there to be a Mercury Saturn trine. So meticulous writing about religious topics. Rahu Keto on the Cancer Capricorn, which is again not particularly certain. Uranus Neptune both retrograde. So it's not surprising if it's reasonable that the Sun is opposing Neptune and Uranus, especially Neptune. Okay, it's just especially Neptune. If the Sun is indeed ruler of the ascendant, which I don't know how they came about this, in the night, then it makes sense, but we don't know. It's probably rectification, which could be an accurate one, but we don't know. Here it says 6 April 1135. So this is the 35, not the 38, the choice. And gives him 69 years of age. Yeah, it could be the chart, could be something different, but again, it's an episode about Moshe ben Maimon, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. So there will be more to this, maybe recorded, maybe not. Um, this portrays Aries, the Aquarius is the seventh, but again, I'm very, very like, how would we know? So it's reasonable that Jupiter is in the 10th house. Um, but yeah, that's the story. So thank you so much for watching.